The House That Breathes Through the Walls. Chapter 1. The Realtor Who Lied. The house was too cheap to be real. Nestled at the end of a long pine-lined street, it had charm. A crooked chimney, stained glass windows, and ivy growing like veins across its walls. When Olivia first saw it, something inside her whispered no, but the realtor's grin smothered her hesitation. "It's a steal," he had said, adjusting his tie. "Old, sure, but solid bones, original fixtures, lots of character." She should have asked more questions about the missing mailbox, the overgrown lawn that seemed to resist being trimmed, the peculiar chill that clung to the porch even under the noon sun. Instead, she signed. The first oddity appeared before the ink dried. The moment she set the pen down, the house let out a soft creak, like an exhale. The realtor chuckled nervously. "Old houses settle," he said. "They breathe." It wasn't until Olivia moved in that the lies fully unraveled. The locks had no standard keys. The keys she was given hummed faintly in her pocket. The walls seemed to expand and contract in the corner of her eye. And at night, as she lay awake, the floorboards whispered above her head. She called the realtor 3 times. No answer. On the 4th day, she returned to the agency to confront him, but found the office abandoned, the sign gone, windows boarded up. A neighbor, an elderly woman with clouded eyes, watched her from across the street. When Olivia approached, the woman only said one thing: "Tells it to those the house chooses." Olivia tried to laugh, but the sound caught in her throat. Behind her, the house loomed quietly, its stained glass windows catching the sunlight like blinking eyes. And for the first time, she realized she hadn't bought the house. The house had bought her. Chapter 2. The Keys That Hummed. On her second night in the house, Olivia finally unpacked the keys. There were 7 in total, each shaped differently, none resembling anything modern. Their handles were ornate, etched with faint runes, and when she held them in her palm, they vibrated gently, almost imperceptibly, like they were responding to her pulse. The first time she tested one in the front door, it turned with a resistance that felt alive, not stiff or rusted, but reluctant, as if the house had to think about letting her in. That night, she placed the keys on the kitchen counter and tried to ignore the faint humming that pulsed from the metal whenever she got too close. She began testing them throughout the house. One fit the narrow door beneath the stairs. It opened to a hallway she hadn't noticed on the initial tour, lined with faded family portraits of people who looked vaguely familiar. Another key opened the upstairs linen closet, but inside was not linen, just a single rocking chair facing the back wall, which had been scratched repeatedly with tiny marks, as if someone had counted their days. She stopped trying keys after that, but the keys didn't stop trying her. Late one night, she awoke to the sound of them rattling on the kitchen counter, though no breeze stirred the air. When she investigated, the keys had arranged themselves in a neat circle. In the center lay an 8th key, one she didn't remember unpacking. It was smaller, thinner, and warmer to the touch. She didn't know which door it opened. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. But the house hummed louder that night. and Olivia swore just before falling asleep. She heard a lock click open on its own somewhere deep in the walls. The keys weren't tools, they were invitations. Chapter 3. First Night, First Breath. Olivia hadn't planned on sleeping in the house so soon. Most of her things were still in boxes, the furniture mismatched and barely unpacked. But exhaustion had outweighed hesitation, and by 10 p.m. she had pulled a blanket onto the bare mattress upstairs and crawled beneath it, fully clothed, phone clutched in one hand like a lifeline. The silence of the house was not comforting. It was the kind of quiet that sounded like something was listening. The wind outside moaned low through the trees, and the ivy that clung to the outer walls scraped softly against the bedroom window. Olivia tried to ignore the creaking of floorboards, blaming it on the old frame, the settling house. But then the breathing began. It wasn't hers. It was faint at first, so faint she thought it was in her head. A slow inhale, a pause, then the soft, steady exhale of something large. It came from behind the walls. She sat upright in bed, heart hammering. The room felt smaller suddenly, heavier, as if the walls were pressing in, expanding and contracting like lungs. She reached for her phone. No charge, though she had plugged it in earlier. The breathing continued. She stood and stepped cautiously across the creaking floor to the wall nearest the headboard. With trembling fingers, she placed her hand on the plaster. It was warm, not like heat from a vent, but warm like skin. The moment she touched it, the breath stopped, and in the silence that followed, she heard it. A heartbeat, low, slow, steady, coming from inside the wall. She backed away slowly, refusing to scream. The air felt thicker. The ceiling groaned slightly above her, as if shifting. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything went still. The walls cooled, the silence returned, her phone buzzed back to life. And she stood alone in the dark, too afraid to sleep again. The house had taken its first breath, and now it was watching. Chapter 4. Whispers in the wallpaper. It started with a sound she could barely catch. A hiss, a murmur, something beneath hearing. Olivia was standing in the upstairs hallway when she first noticed it, her hand brushing against the faded floral wallpaper as she turned the corner. For a brief moment, she thought she felt a breath. The wallpaper wasn't normal. Up close, it revealed layers, faint outlines beneath the surface like words written and painted over 100 times. It curled at the corners, yellowed with age, and gave off a strange scent, something like mildew and perfume mixed together, familiar yet wrong. The next night the whispers began. At first they were unintelligible, muffled syllables like a radio detune just beyond comprehension. Olivia would freeze in the hall, her ear close to the wall, trying to focus. They came and went, always from behind the wallpaper. She began tracing the voices. They traveled, sometimes down the hall, sometimes into the guest bedroom. Once they stopped directly behind her as she stood still, her breath caught, afraid to turn around. By the third day, the words grew clearer. "Don't forget, we lived here. He sees." Each whisper came from a different place in the wall. Some were soft and feminine, others sharp and ragged. They didn't feel like echoes. They felt like warnings. One night, desperate for answers, Olivia grabbed a knife from the kitchen and returned to the hallway. She cut into the wallpaper slowly, expecting plaster and dust. But what she found instead stopped her breath. Underneath the first layer was another wall, a different wallpaper, older. She cut again, more layers, different colors, different patterns, and behind every layer were names, dates, messages. Still here? They took us. This is not a home. She dropped the knife. The whispers fell silent, and from deep inside the walls, something chuckled. Low, wet, amused. Chapter 5. The Room That Rearranges. Olivia first noticed the change when she stubbed her toe on the coffee table. The table had moved just a few inches from where she swore she had left it. She shrugged it off as forgetfulness, a product of exhaustion and stress. But over the next few days, the changes became undeniable. The bookshelf in the study would swap shelves overnight. Lamps appeared in corners she didn't remember placing them. Rugs bunched up without anyone walking on them. One morning, she walked into the kitchen and stopped cold. The refrigerator was on the opposite wall. She tried to document it. She drew maps of each room before bed, taking photos and taping them to the wall. The next morning, every image had changed. Some showed completely different layouts. Others had been defaced, the furniture blurred or scratched out as if censored. It was as if the house didn't want to be understood. One night, she left a camera running in the living room. When she reviewed the footage, her blood ran cold. From midnight to 3 a.m., the room shifted, chairs sliding on their own, cabinets twisting and turning like puzzle pieces. The walls themselves seemed to pulse, shrinking and expanding as if the house were breathing deeply. And at the center of the footage, for just a few frames, was a figure. Faceless, thin, draped in fabric that looked like aged wallpaper. Standing in the middle of the room, pointing toward the hallway. She rewound the footage. It wasn't pointing, it was beckoning. That night, Olivia pushed a chair against her bedroom door. But in the morning, the door was wide open, and the chair was downstairs, sitting calmly in the middle of the living room, facing the hall, as if waiting for her return. Chapter 6. The Vent That Watches. It was a small vent, barely the size of a shoebox, wedged high on the wall of the upstairs hallway. Olivia hadn't noticed it until her 6th day in the house. It was old, rusted at the corners, and covered by a thin mesh grate that didn't quite sit flush with the wall. She only noticed it because she felt it watching her. She'd been walking down the hall when the sensation came, prickling the back of her neck like cold fingers. Turning around, she caught the faintest glint of something behind the grate. Not movement exactly, but presence, a stillness that didn't belong. Curious and a little unnerved, she dragged a chair over and climbed up to inspect it. The grate didn't resist. It popped free too easily, landing on the floor with a dull clang. Behind the grate was a dark shaft that disappeared into shadow. And something else. A smell, not of mold or dust, but something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. She shined a flashlight into the vent and gasped. A single glass eye stared back at her. It was embedded in the wall, fixed there like an ornament, but it wasn't fake. The moment her light hit it, the pupil contracted. She stumbled off the chair, crashing to the floor. The eye disappeared. The vent now showed only black. That night, she blocked it with cardboard and duct tape. But in the morning, the barrier was gone. Not removed, gone, like it had never been there. And now, wherever she went in the house, Olivia could feel it again, that watching. The vent wasn't just an opening. It was a window, and someone, or something, on the other side had finally seen her back. Chapter 7. A diary in the floorboards. The creaking in the upstairs hallway had become rhythmic, almost like footsteps. Olivia tried to convince herself it was the wood settling, but the pattern was too precise. It always started the same way. 5 slow steps, a pause, then 3 quick ones as if someone darted forward. Each night, same time, same path. One evening, determined to prove to herself it was nothing, Olivia knelt down on the landing to listen. Her ear close to the floor, she felt a faint pulse beneath the wood, steady and soft, like a heartbeat. Then, just beneath her, a single floorboard let out a long groan. She reached for a screwdriver. The board lifted more easily than expected, revealing a shallow compartment filled with dust and debris. Nestled inside was something wrapped in faded fabric. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it, a small leather-bound diary with cracked edges and pages curled with age. The name on the first page was written in delicate cursive, Eleanor Gray, 1913. Olivia sat down and began to read. The entries were haunting. Eleanor had moved into the house after her husband's death, seeking solitude, but instead she found noises, breathing, shadows that slithered through doorways, rooms that shifted, and most chilling of all, dreams of being watched by something inside the walls. One passage read, "The house listens. It knows I'm afraid. Every time I try to leave, it shifts. It needs someone, I think. It chose me." Another. I found the eye. It blinked. Olivia closed the diary, breath catching in her throat. The story was too close, too exact. Outside, the hallway creaked. 5 slow steps, then 3 quick ones. She dared open the door. She knew what she'd see, and she feared it might look just like her. Chapter 8. The Walls Know Her Name. By the 8th day, Olivia had stopped denying the house was alive. She now moved quietly through the halls, whispering when she spoke, as if not to disturb it. She didn't turn on lights unless she had to. The house preferred the dark. It was easier to hide that way, easier to watch. It began that morning in the living room. The wallpaper, faded roses on a cream background, had begun to peel. She noticed a strip curling near the fireplace and reached out to press it flat, but as she lifted it, her heart stuttered. Beneath the wallpaper, written in long looping scrawl, was her name. Olivia. She froze. It wasn't part of the wall design. It wasn't an old message left by a former owner. The handwriting was hers, and she had never written it. She pulled back more paper. Another name, her name, again and again, written over itself in layers, in chalk, in charcoal, in what looked like dried ink or blood, hundreds of times. Some with question marks, some in all capital letters, some scratched in like someone had clawed them out with fingernails. She stumbled back, heart racing. That night she heard it for the first time. From within the walls, a voice, not a whisper, but a call. Olivia. She pressed her ear to the bedroom wall, her breath caught in her chest. Olivia, it said again, softer this time. We know you. She backed away slowly. Then it spoke once more, clearer than before. We remember you. She didn't sleep that night, because the house didn't just know she was there. It knew who she was, and somehow it always had. Chapter 9. Breathing in the basement. Olivia had avoided the basement since the day she moved in. There had been no practical reason to go down there. No storage boxes, no washer and dryer. Just a heavy door, a narrow staircase, and an overwhelming sense of dread that clung to the edges of her mind whenever she passed by. But now, with the house whispering her name and the diary's final pages pointing toward the cellar, she knew she could no longer ignore it. She waited until mid-afternoon. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows, giving her the illusion of safety. She grabbed a flashlight and stood at the top of the basement stairs, heart hammering in her chest. The door creaked open with a sound like a long sigh. The air that drifted up was warm, damp, and alive. Each step down felt heavier than the last, as if the stairs were resisting her. The wooden handrail pulsed faintly beneath her palm, warm like the walls had been that first night. When she reached the bottom, the flashlight flickered. The basement was vast, far bigger than the house should have allowed. The walls were made of stone, veined with something that shimmered in the light. Roots crawled across the ceiling, and in the center of the floor, a pit. It wasn't deep, but it was wide, and from within it came the sound she feared most. Breathing. Not human, not mechanical, slow, wet, and patient. She stepped closer. The walls of the pit weren't walls at all. They were made of faces, faces carved into the stone, mouths open in eternal silence, eyes hollow. Some looked peaceful, others looked like they had screamed. In the middle of the pit sat a chair, and on the chair was a mirror. And she didn't want to look, but she did. And what she saw wasn't her face, but all the other versions of herself this house had ever taken. All the Olivias who never made it out. Chapter 10. The locked door that opens itself. The door had always been there, tucked at the end of the hallway on the second floor. Its knob cold to the touch and unmoving no matter how hard Olivia turned it. She had tested every key she owned. None fit. Eventually she stopped trying. Until the morning it stood ajar. No sound had woken her. No wind had stirred, but as she stepped into the hallway, hair bristling on the back of her neck, she saw it. The door, cracked open just enough to reveal complete darkness on the other side, as if it had opened not by force, but by invitation. Olivia hesitated, then clutching the flashlight she now kept at her side at all times, she pushed the door open. The room beyond was silent, not quiet, silent, like a vacuum. The air was cold and still, and the beam from her flashlight barely penetrated it. Dust floated in slow motion. There was no furniture, no windows, just walls, and at the far end, a wardrobe. It stood alone, ancient and carved with the same strange eye-like symbol she'd seen scratched into the wallpaper and engraved on one of the keys. The wardrobe's doors were slightly open. Inside, hanging in perfect stillness, were dresses. Dozens of them, from different eras, different styles. Some Victorian, some mid-century, some modern. All of them in her size. On the floor beneath the dresses sat shoes, and on the wall above them, photographs. Photos of women, dozens, maybe more, each one standing in front of this house, each one smiling, each one Olivia. Not lookalikes, not similar features. Her. She reached toward the closest photo. Her fingers brushed the frame, and the wardrobe doors slammed shut. The flashlight flickered. A whisper filled the room. "You opened it, now remember?" The door behind her creaked, and slowly she turned. Chapter 11. When the house spoke back. The moment Olivia turned to face the creaking door, she felt the pressure change. The house was no longer just breathing, it was speaking. Through the walls, the floorboards, the very air. Her name came again, but not as a whisper. It was full and clear, spoken in her own voice, echoing from nowhere and everywhere at once. Olivia. She stumbled back into the hallway. The photographs from the wardrobe now lined the walls outside, hundreds of versions of herself staring back with wide, hollow smiles. Some were faded, others fresh, all of them watching. "Why me?" she asked aloud, unsure who she expected to answer. The lights flickered, and then, from the depths of the house, it answered, "Because you stayed." The voice didn't come from any direction. It pulsed through the wallpaper, vibrated through the floor, rolled like thunder across the ceiling. Olivia's hands trembled. "Stayed? You looked, you listened, you remembered." "I didn't ask to remember," she whispered. "But you did, and now you carry us." The hallway stretched, elongated, walls shifting and bending like ribs expanding with breath. Doors opened on their own, revealing flashes of memories she didn't recognize. Children playing, an old man sobbing in a rocking chair, a woman writing in blood on the wall. They were here, the house said. They fed us with their fear, their forgetting. You woke us. Images swirled around Olivia now, each room playing memories from lives before hers. One Olivia clawed at the front door. Another stood calmly, hands outstretched to something invisible. Another was smiling. The voices rose, layers upon layers of other versions of her. "Welcome back. You belong to the house. You are the house." Olivia fell to her knees, and for the first time, she screamed, and the house screamed back. Chapter 12. the scent of forgotten lives. After the scream, everything changed. The house grew quiet, not the kind of quiet that soothed, but the kind that warned. It was the breath held before the exhale. Olivia felt it in her bones. The walls no longer whispered. The rooms no longer rearranged. It was as if the house were watching to see what she would do next. The air was thick with a new scent. She noticed it in the kitchen first, a sharp, musty aroma laced with something floral, lavender maybe, but beneath it was something metallic, something old. The smell clung to her clothes, her skin, her hair. She followed it through the house, her senses sharpened by dread. Every room carried a variation of the same perfume. In the hallway, lemon and mildew. In the study, tobacco and earth. Upstairs, in the forgotten guest bedroom, the scent of lilac and ash. Each smell awakened something inside her, feelings she couldn't explain. Regret, nostalgia. It was in the attic that she found the source. The door creaked open slowly, releasing a wave of air so heavy she staggered. The attic had changed. Where once there were dusty boxes, there were now items carefully placed. Combs, gloves, glasses, shoes, all from different decades. Each item was paired with a small vial, sealed with wax, labeled in faded ink. Agnes, 1946. Delilah, 1891. Rachel, 2003. And one read, Olivia, pending. Her stomach turned. She opened a vial. The scent inside hit her instantly. Fresh rain, ink, and the smell of the house the day she moved in. Her life. Distilled, preserved. She realized then, the house didn't just remember lives, it collected them. Chapter 13. A home that remembers pain. The house had grown still, but Olivia knew better than to trust the quiet. It was the stillness of someone holding their breath, not in peace, but in anticipation. The walls no longer whispered. The vents had gone silent. Even the portraits along the hallway seemed to avoid her gaze. But the pain remained. Not hers, the house's. It started with the photographs. One by one, they began to change. Olivia watched in horror as the smiling women in the frames, herself but not, started to blur. Their faces dissolved, eyes darkened, mouths twisted. Some appeared to be crying. Others were reaching toward the glass, their hands smudging the inside of the frame. Then came the voices. Not whispers. Moans. Wails. Lamentations of the lives lived within these walls. Olivia couldn't walk down the hall without hearing them. We waited. We trusted. We begged to be let go. She entered the bedroom, now stripped of its comfort. The bed sagged as if someone unseen still lay in it. The mirror above the dresser had cracked straight down the center. A note had appeared on her nightstand. Not written, but scorched into the wood. It only hurts when you forget. That night, she dreamed. She saw the house as it was in other times. Newer, older, in flames under snow. She saw women, men, children, all of them passing through. leaving pieces of themselves behind. Fear, rage, grief. The house didn't feed on joy, it remembered sorrow. She saw a young boy hiding in a cupboard, clutching a broken toy. A mother rocking in a chair long after her child had vanished. A man carving words into the basement stone. Forgive me. Their pain soaked into the floors, their memories etched into every doorframe. When she awoke, her body ached, her joints burned, her eyes were heavy with tears she hadn't cried. She walked through the house in silence, hearing the echoes of those she'd never met, but now knew. In the dining room, the table was set for 6. Dust clung to every plate. At the head sat a letter folded neatly, though her name was not on it. She opened it. Inside, "Thank you for listening." The air in the room shifted, warmer now, grateful, and for the first time Olivia understood. The house wasn't just haunted. It was the haunting, a monument built brick by brick from every pain it had ever absorbed. And now it pulsed with hers. Chapter 14, The Last Night Inside. Olivia stood at the threshold of the front door, unsure whether she was being allowed to leave or tested. The doorknob, which had always been cold and unmoving, now felt warm beneath her hand. Behind her, the house groaned like it was holding its breath, deciding whether to release or reclaim. She turned back and looked over her shoulder. The hallway stretched behind her like a tunnel into memory. Every step she had taken here echoed now in the walls. She could hear the floorboards sighing, the walls gently pulsing like lungs. The portraits stared quietly. The air was no longer hostile, but mournful. The house knew she was ready, but it was not done speaking. That night she stayed one more time, not because she had to, but because some part of her needed closure. She lit every candle in the attic, surrounded herself with the vials and forgotten objects, and waited. She brought the diary, now worn and stained with age. She read aloud the names of every person she could find written within. Agnes, Eleanor, Rachel. She spoke each one like a prayer. As she did, the house seemed to lean closer, listening. Around midnight, the wind outside went still. The branches stopped scraping the windows, and from the walls, floor, ceiling, voices rose. Not screams, not whispers, just remembering. They told stories of mothers who wept, of children who vanished, of men who made bargains and women who stayed too long. Olivia heard them all, not in horror, but in honor. The pain the house had carried was finally being spoken aloud. She wandered from room to room. In each space the air shimmered. She saw flickers, shadows of the past, a little girl skipping through the kitchen, a man weeping on the stairs, a woman painting words onto the walls. They did not see her, but she felt them. In the nursery, long abandoned, a mobile spun slowly, though no wind stirred. The scent of lavender filled the air. Olivia placed her hand on the crib's edge and whispered, "You were loved." In the final hour, the house began to creak, shift, and sigh. It no longer demanded, it wept. And Olivia, wrapped in candlelight and memory, whispered her own name back to it. My name is Olivia. I am not yours. But I understand. The house stopped, and for the first time since she moved in, it exhaled peacefully. The shadows softened, and morning came. Chapter 15. The house that let her go. The sunlight that spilled into the house that morning felt different. It wasn't filtered through shadows or warped by stained glass. It was warm, clear. For the first time since Olivia moved in, the house didn't resist the day. She stepped barefoot onto the wood floors. They no longer creaked beneath her, no longer whimpered under her weight. The hallway felt wider, the air lighter, the silence not empty but content. A hush of peace, like a song ending in its final note. She moved slowly, touching the walls as she passed. They were no longer warm with warning or cold with malice. They were neutral now, still, at peace, as if the house had finally finished speaking and was resting for the first time in years. She stopped at the parlor, now bare, yet bright. The chairs were back in place. The photographs had faded to white. The hearth, once cold and choked with ash, held a single coal glowing gently. A heart no longer burning, but beating. The attic door hung open. Olivia climbed the stairs one last time. The candles had melted to stubs. The scent of every life once collected there had faded. The vials were empty now, labeled but no longer sealed. The wardrobe that once held the dresses of countless Olivias was bare. In the center of the attic, where the floor had once pulsed with memory, stood a small box. Inside was a single brass key and a note. For when you return, if you choose to. Olivia didn't cry. She felt no fear, no confusion, only understanding. The house had never wanted to harm her. It wanted her to remember, to carry the truth of those who had come before, and now it was letting her go. She turned the key in her hand one last time and placed it back in the box. The lid closed with a soft sigh. She walked down the stairs, passing the empty rooms and silent portraits. As she reached the entryway, the portraits blinked once, softly, their gazes finally at ease. The front door stood open, golden light spilling across the threshold. Wind rustled the trees gently outside, the ivy finally still. She didn't look back. As she stepped outside, the air smelled of pine and morning dew. Birds sang. The street was quiet. A breeze kissed her skin. The world was waiting. Behind her, the house closed the door on its own. Not in anger, not in secrecy, but like a breath exhaled. And for the first time, Olivia breathed back, free. She walked into the sun, the house behind her not forgotten but forgiven. And in the window, high in the attic, a shadow watched her go, then faded quietly into light.